Yes. You smell that, folks. That's the smell of azaleas. That's the smell of piano keys. That's the smell of Jim Nance, Trevor Immerman, and the sweet, sweet nothings of Augusta. Spencer, it's the Masters week. It's the Rotoballer PGA show. What's going on?
Byron, very excited to do our first major championship together. It should be a fun week to run through everything that's on the board. We were talking a little bit about our models before we went on. We'll compare. We'll see what we have that are similarities. I know that there's one player that we seem to both be on this week, but those are discussions to be had later in the show.
We've got lots to chat about, Spencer. We've got till the end of time. I do know that if you do longer than a 6-hour podcast, you can't upload it directly to Spotify and iTunes, but that's okay. This won't go 6, but we're going to have a fun time chatting about the Masters, the first major of the Rotoballer PGA show. As always, the show is brought to you by Rotoballer. Right now, we've got code MASTERS rocking a 30% off for those of you that missed out the new code earlier in the year. It's the Masters week, and the good people at Rotoballer have taken care of you there. So use code NEW, jump in for the week, jump in for the year. I'd suggest you do it for the year. If you don't like what you get, money back guaranteed. We have no problem reimbursing you because we know, me and Spencer, Joe Idoni, Joe Nicely, we know what we're giving you. We know it's going to be a good product. It's going to be quality items. Go grab yourself a Rotoballer premium subscription right now using code MASTERS. So that's what we got going on this week, Spence. Lots of people have spoken about this golf course already. I'll just try and touch some high line points, and then we can get into like the golfers, right? Because I feel like kind of trying to tell everyone driving distance, iron play from 150 and out, par 5 scoring around the greens, course history, debutantes, all that jazz. That's pretty much the summary in my opinion. Have you got any very high level stuff that we can add to the course, kind of what you think people might not take away from other course comps that we've had?
No, I mean, I think you mostly hit it on the head. The only thing that I would add to that I do think is worth discussing is, a lot of the reason that we get this rollover predictability at the course obviously comes naturally from the answers you said, the distance, the around the green. You do have different outcomes here of just the unique nature of the undulation and everything. But I think beyond any of those answers, you always get these sub 90 man fields. The bottom of the board, they're filled with debutantes, but they're also filled with amateurs. And the amateur part of it is really what the problem is. You add that into all these guys, that are the former champions that are in their 60s or, I mean, even if you want to say like Tiger and Phil at this point, like, I mean, you have guys like that. And it's one of those situations where the bottom end of the field is much weaker than a lot of tournaments with already less players in the event. So, for me, when I run this and when I ran my model, like I've obviously talked a lot about the 7 deadly sins. And I do think if a debutante or somebody is going to win this that maybe doesn't have the prerequisites that we're looking for, I always try to find 3 starts. This might be the natural year where a Ludvig Aberg is able to win. He has Skovron on the bag. Skovron was with Ricky for a bunch of years. Last year with Tom Kim, we saw success. I also think Windham Clark, you don't always get a legitimate top 5, top 10 sort of golfer in the world making his first appearance. And Clark's skill set is ideally suited, you would think, for the Masters. So, I don't want to get too caught in this. Like, I kind of made the argument this week that if we're talking purely outright betting, I'm not going to have those guys on my card. There's just too much history that's proven against it. But I think when we're talking specifically for DFS here, names like Aberg and Clark, all of a sudden now that's where the value starts coming into play because everybody's gone too much the other way and we don't need that outright victory from them. So I think game theory is going to be very important when we try to dive into this board, and ownership always plays a very heavy thing. And even more so this week when you're going to have, Byron, sub 70 players in reality that have any real consideration.
Yes, I would say that's the case. We've got tons and tons. How many? We got a casual 21 debutants from my count, maybe 22. I don't think I have Akshay in there. So is it 22 new debutants in an 88-man field? So literally a quarter of the field.
Yeah, I believe so, because I also don't have Akshay in mine, and I think that's exactly where I was too.
Perfect. So that's an important distinction. And I, Spencer, don't do this very often. I've ramped my model up to 30% of my weighting is course history this week. I do it only 1 week a year. It feels so gross. It feels so uncomfortable. I've done it. If you
30%.
haven't played well at Augusta, you're not going to be doing well in my model unless I do a maniac only override on your ass. But that's only happened to a select few like Cam and mostly the live guys who don't really have the best data for me. Let's chat about Windham Clark, who you mentioned is an ideal course fit, Spencer. He's just starting off the 10K range at 10,000 flat. He's the only debutant of the 10K range. The next debutant goes all the way down to Ludvig at $9,100. So that is a steep, steep price. He is the US Open champion. He's making his debut appearance at the Masters, Spencer. I believe only Fuzzy Zeller has won this thing on his debut. And then I think 4 or 5 other guys by the names of Jordan Spieth and a few others who I think had their best week of the week that week, played phenomenally and finished second in their debut. So not that often does a debutant play the best golf here. There are obviously a handful of guys. You're going to have to find 1 or 2 this week. You mentioned, Spencer, and let's get off to the start with a bit of a discussion or a bit of a pushback from my side, because we've heard Phil Mickelson speak about how lefties thrive around this venue because they can hit that power fade. Windham Clark is the antithesis of that, in my opinion, off the tee at least. He's going to be a fascinating watch to see how he hits those boomerang fades around these dogleg lefts, right? Unless he's going to be clubbing down to that 3-wood and kind of trying to rope it around there. There's going to be some big holes where he misses exorbitantly right on the dogleg. But now missing on the fat side of a dogleg, I was told by, was it Jaco van Sale, a South African Sunshine Tour professional, you always want to miss on the outside of the dogleg, never on the inside. So on those left to right of doglegs, he is going to be missing on the outside, but it does concern me that his shot shape doesn't quite fit this thing, along with his price tag, along with his debutante, reasonings here. Ownership dependent. What are you seeing him as ownership? And then we can go from there.
I don't have enough data from an ownership perspective to feel extremely comfortable with it. Like, that's probably going to be something that I re-update on Tuesday to try to get a better general idea for it. But
what percent would you play him at, and would you get off of him?
I mean, I think if he's sub 10%, he's very interesting.
Do you think he gets sub 10%?
It's an intriguing board, Byron, because we finally get an outlook here. Scottie, 12,100, but it's a price tag that runs down to 6,000. So from a game theory perspective, it's not as easy to put Scottie into some of these builds that we've seen in the past. Like, there were so many names that we could find in any of those other tournaments that he had played, that the Jacob Bridgmans of the world, the Max Grazermans, there were all these options that had a bunch of win equity for me, or at least top 20 equity down the board. I don't see that this week. So I do think, like, I understand Scottie's the best golfer in the world. He's probably going to win. It's just going to take builds are going to be very similar across the board when you start with Scottie. Like, I think you're going to always see the same player. So if you're going to play Scottie, you're going to have to try to find a way to get different somewhere else with it. But, I think Brooks is going to be very popular. I think Scottie's going to be very popular. I think it puts us into this range to now where we're trying to decide, where's Rahm's ownership going to be? Is everybody done with this Rory McIlroy experience? Like, we know that I never seem to be able to get off of it, but there are going to be people that want to move the other direction with him. You take Windham Clark here. Is this debutante answer and some of the shot shaping that you talked about going to drive people off of him? I think you're going to be able to find leverage in this section, and I do think that there's an ability to get a game theory advantage going here, but I'd like to see where the ownerships exactly land. I think ownership being just like a neutral part of the game and it not mattering. Obviously, Scottie would be the number one play for me. I think Rahm is probably the second best play on the board. Rory would be third. I think all three of those are, at least from like the Rahm and Rory discussion, I think those two are closer than the market seems to believe on it. And I don't know where ownership will land, but as I said, Byron, like, I'm curious to hear your take on Scottie and what your plans are with him. But I do think from a game theory perspective, it's going to make builds difficult, if nothing else, which that is what we want, by the way. I've been asking for so long, make people actually have to make a decision. This is what we get this week. Like, you're going to have to either pencil in Scottie or you're going to have to go somewhere else. And I'm fine with anybody that wants to go any route with it. Scottie's the number one projected win equity player by quite a great deal in my model. And I know Clinton is, how many is he going to win by? Well, the way that Scottie plays and the way he's
5.
playing, if the putter is good, yeah, he's going to win by 5. But
Always wins by 5 when he wins big.
Yeah. But I just think like when we're talking like large field MME contests, I'm always the one that tries to get different in those regards.
Yes. I think Scottie's going to be owned to his normal capacity anyway because of the reliability you get. Before we speak about Scottie, Spencer, because it's an essential part of the board, because he's so, 90% of the time he's inside the top 20 when it's like all said and done. So he's going to be at the top of the leaderboard almost always. Where are you taking Scottie Scheffler if you are? You're going to be playing him single entries, 3 entry maxes, or are you going to be playing him in these bigger contests, multi entries?
I think he's better in this. I think he's better in the single entry sort of builds with it. I do think when we start getting into some of these large field contests, like what ownership do you think Scottie's going to realistically come in at?
I'd imagine somewhere in the 20s. I know it is the Masters, and it's interesting because we finally get a bunch of live guys to suck some really good live golfers to suck up some ownership outside of those designated events. We finally get a good golf course. We finally get everyone playing together. He's 12-1 with a 6K floor, but it's a 70-man field at the end of the day. So it's such a crazy dilemma of variables going on here for Scottie. In my opinion, Spencer, I'm going to be leaning into the single entry, 3 entry maxes this week and not playing the Scotties. I know I went on the Rotoballer radio from my car outside the Peanut Pub in Oskaloosa, yelling at the guys there saying to play Scottie. But at 12-1, I think you've got to play him in these multi-entry builds. If you're going to be playing Scottie to try and just get those variabilities through there, you're going to be relying on some really sketchy guys. And that's the problem with Scottie Scheffler. I think to put Scottie Scheffler in your lineup, you can't have Brooks without going incredibly weird, and the other 4 guys, who the heck knows is going to show up there. That's the problem. I feel like it's easier to get a Brooks Koepka and a Xander Schauffele in a lineup. You can see those 2 guys dueling it out behind Scottie, finishing 2nd, 3rd. Those guys aren't going to be in 2nd and 3rd in Scottie's lineups because it's just difficult to get to them there.
It comes down to roster construction, and I think that's kind of the point I was trying to make. There's just certain players that you're not going to be able to get to when you play Scottie Scheffler, and that's going to make all lineups very similar that start with him. I brought up the DraftKings board. I was just curious what this would look like. I mean, how many lineups are going to start Scheffler, Theegala, Connors, Siwoo Kim, Harris English? Like, these are all names that are going to fit into builds, and if you went with those 5, you still have 8,600 left for like a Finau or a Cameron Young or whoever you want to go in that section. So that feels like a very natural build that somebody that's going to start with Scottie is going to go with. Scottie leaves you with 7,580. If you try to put in, who would be your second favorite player?
As a Scottie lineup, I would probably throw in, just to be different, I'd probably go with Cam Smith, because I feel like if there's someone that does show up of that's going to be less owned in this range, it's going to be Cam. It's a shot in the dark. I think a very chalky situation would be Scottie Willie Z as well. I feel like that could very much take place. So at least from my side of things, I'm very heavy on Willie Z this week. I would say Niemann at 9,600, might be a very solid option for a lot of people after Scottie. So it's tricky. We'll have to wait and see, Spence, on some ownership. This is all very ownership dependent at the top of the board. I do want to say, though, roster construction this week is essential. It's imperative because it's such a course history dependent venue. Chalk, you're going to have to eat more chalk than normal. If you're trying to dodge chalk at the Masters, you're likely going to find yourself in trouble. I'm the chalk dodger, like that. I would love to put that as my handle. If I wasn't the model maniac, I'd be dodging outlines of chalk for days and never cashing. But I think at Augusta, that's the way you have to go, right?
Yeah, you can't get stuck in. There's a limited field. Everybody's going to be higher owned for that reason to begin with. But I think the reason why I asked you the question is because I was just trying to find somebody that was, whether it's a consensus pick or even somebody that's a little bit off the grain of where the consensus is moving there. Like Scheffler and Niemann, I think, is a really interesting way to have a discussion about this. You start Scheffler and Niemann, you have $7,075 left. Do you think you have enough players in the $6,000 range that you feel comfortable dropping down multiple times?
No, because I'm looking at their history And anything south of $6,300 has got white boxes. There's no one's played this course, and they all crap golfers at that price.
I'm gonna make a prediction here, just based off of just the way that I'm running these numbers on this. Scottie Scheffler might win this golf tournament. I'm not going to discredit that being a possibility. I think if you look in these really large field GPP contests where there's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of players, some of those like millionaire maker type of deals with it, I'm going to say the winning lineup, even if Scottie Scheffler wins, doesn't have Scottie Scheffler in the lineup.
Even with like 500,000 different lineups.
I don't think it's going to, because you're going to have to be so precise on the bottom. And I guess for me, the problem comes into look at the course history predictability and the course history returns that we get here. It's the same players. I understand Rory's missed 2 of the last 3 cuts, but it's top 10 after top 10 from all of these guys. Koepka providing top 10, Xander providing top 10s. You're getting all these top 10 finishes over and over again. I feel like somebody's going to be able to put together a lineup where they go 6 of 6 with 6 top 10s, which is obviously what you're going to need, but it's going to beat the Scheffler lineup that got stuck at the bottom having to play 2 of these $6,000 guys. And, it's going to cash and whatever it's going to happen, but you're not going to get that high-end finish because I don't think you're going to get enough playability down beneath them. That's just my perspective on it. I think Scottie's a great play, but they've really made this challenging for a board that I don't love the bottom. Like, I like Harris English. Like, that would, for me, be the $7,000 guy that I think has a lot of playability this week. But even with a Scottie, Scottie and Harris would leave me with 77.25. Like, that might have to be like the exact specific build that I take there, because to me, English is probably $800 mispriced to begin with. So I guess, like, the problem is, Byron, that doesn't even make you different. Like, I think that's going to also be a very popular start to a build. So, where are we getting different from there if that's the case with it? Like, it would have to be somebody like, I don't even want to talk about Cantlay on a podcast. I can't do that in a major ever.
Not in a major. I know. And that's the scary part, Spencer. It's a tricky situation, man. It's a diabolical situation. And we can chat about some 7K guys and 6K guys here down the board, towards the bit of the end of the show. Yeah. I think we've made our point about Scottie kind of being the right option. I think you bet him currently. Scottie Scheffler for a top 5 is plus 105. I feel like that's so
sick.
It's so sick. It's so disgustingly gross. But I tell you what, Scottie Scheffler, folks, has finished inside the top 5 of the last 12 months, 65% of the time, which is technically an edge. If you speak about a raw, very simplistic edge. In majors, he's done it 36% of the time. He missed a multitude of them early on. I'd imagine that number goes up considerably if you remove the first year of majors, right? So I think that's the way to go. You just bet the guy top 5, top 10, leave it at that. He's been one of the most profitable top 10 bets known to man, Spencer, despite being negative 200 every week. He just does it. He oversees those statistics, and it's amazing to see. So I'll be betting him top 5, top 10, and calling it a day. Just going heavy on him in the betting market, leaving him alone in DFS for the most part, unless I'm going into like a milli maker, big tournament and just shooting like 1 or 2 darts. I think I'm going to go with Scottie in that side of things.
I do think, I'm trying to piece together lineups here. You're going to end up with, I guess English can be like the cash saver for you a little bit. And if you go that mentality, a Chris Kirk at 6,900 has a little bit of playability, in my opinion. Like, there are a couple of names to where you can kind of get stuck in that $7,000 range. And if you don't go with quite the consensus pick over and over again, a Max Homa at 8,300 kind of would probably make you different. Sam Burns, I know Homa's another name that hasn't had major championship pedigree himself, but when he came to it's unfortunate, Byron, when he came to the Masters last year, my model loved him, and the only thing that held him back was his lack of success at Augusta. And unfortunately, he did it again without another top 30 finish. Like, he just can't seem to put the pieces together. I do think we get the best finish from him that we've gotten, but I guess the problem with that is, what are we really talking about from a ceiling? Because I can't imagine he's going to win after not being in contention all these years there.
Okay, Spence, let's highlight a few things from your article real quick. Max Homa, top 30 at the Masters. I don't think that's ever happened, right? Just to kind of give people a high-level summary of how you can use your article whether you believe the 9 guys that you filtered down works, the 7 deadly sins, go check it out, rotable.com. It's free. All of Spencer's articles are usually premium. He's got that out there for you free. He's filtered down 7 different rules. I've loved them. They sloth, they greed, they lust, all sorts of delightful sins that we like to get ourselves involved in. And it filters the field down to 9 golfers that have, over the last 6 years, this article has identified the winner every single year. One of them being success, aka top 30s at the Masters in your recent last 3 starts. Matsuyama doesn't fit that, right, Spence? Like, he's just never succeeded here. I think 50% of golfers that I saw win the Masters since 2000 have had at least 2 top 30s. Yeah. You know, like, that's in the last 5 years prior to their win. I did a bunch of like filtering on random things like that. And you at least to have 2 top 20s, you know, so in your last 5 years. So those kind of performances, the upside performances aren't as popular as you'd think. You know, there's half of these guys that won this tournament haven't finished inside the top 5 before at the Masters. But over the last 10 years, those guys have finished second or better in a major. So there's a bit of give and take when it comes to these kind of situations, but it's such a beautifully nuanced golf course. It's such a beautifully nuanced event. I'm so excited, Spencer. Let's chat about the 9K range. Let's chat about some guys that we want to bet. Before we get out of the 10s, I'm in on Brooks at 10-2. I'll be playing him in DFS. If you told me after you get off the PGA Tour, off the PGA Championship, he just won that bad boy. His 5th major. He's had 8 since 2017, Spencer. He's had 8 seconds or wins on the PGA, you know, in majors. Like, that's unrivaled from anyone in this field. He's 20-1. He's had 2 runner-ups at the Masters. Like, what are we doing at 20-1? You know, we've got other guys at Rory McIlroy. He's at half the odds. You know, like, it's an incredible situation. I've even mentioned
you're talking to somebody who has a sickness with Rory McIlroy. I just want to preface that before we continue.
It's crazy. I can't understand what's going on with Brooks's number here. So I'm in on Brooks this week. I'll give you my quick take on Rory. I love Rory at the Masters had he not won the Open or the US Open or the PGA Championship. The fact that this is the 4th major he has to win, I looked it up. It's Gary Player. It's Bobby Jones. It's Tiger, Jack. This isn't just winning the Masters and sitting next to Danny Willett at a dinner later next year. It's being in the history books amongst some of the greatest golfers of our time. And it's too much for him. Like, what's on the line is too much, Spencer, unfortunately.
Can I mean, I'm not going to be able to sell you. I understand that. Can I give you some things that I like about Rory this week?
Statistically, I'm going to agree with you on every single thing. It's a mental thing for him.
I would agree with that answer, and that's what's always held him back. Here's what I liked about some of the comments that he said at the Valero. He talked about strategy safety. He talked about going into this tournament maybe with not that reckless abandonment that, like, we see from him every single time. Showed up on the leaderboard this week. I understand that's a backdoor finish that didn't matter. I'm not trying to sell that into being anything different than whatever it always is with him, but you know, he had been averaging 11 bogeys per start over the 5 tournaments that he played, 4 bogeys this last week. I think for me that the biggest thing that I took away, 1.88 strokes gained per round at the Valero with his approach game. That was the best output that I had in my model since the Wells Fargo in 2019. I also only had 6 tournaments that I had in general that were better for him. 4 of those 6 tournaments came 2013 or prior. So wow. Rory finally put together some quality iron play entering the Masters. Now, he's probably going to get there on Thursday, and we're going to be 3 over par, 5 holes in, and it's going to be, well, we've done it again, and I fell for the trap once again with it. But I do think the public narrative around him has run a little rampant in the space. And for me, that's kind of where I'm trying to pivot and create leverage in some of these opportunities. If everybody wants to say a debutante cannot win, and I understand that, that's probably not the route I'm going either. But I do think there are players that make a lot of sense from a game theory perspective that fit into builds. We talked about my 7 Deadly Sins article. Yeah, there's 9 names that fit that mix, but it doesn't mean because you didn't fit that mix that I'm all of a sudden excluding you. If you're in 3 or 4 of those categories having problems, we have more issues to discuss, but not having a top 30 at this venue over a 3-year run of playing this tournament, that eliminated that's the last sin that was in my model. There were 3 players that eliminated. Jason Day, Adam Scott, so 2 Aussies get eliminated there, and then Max Homa. Day was 39th, Scott 39th, Homa 43rd. I do think with the price tags that we're looking at on them for DFS, they have playability this week. That doesn't mean that I'm rushing to go bet them to win this golf tournament, but I think as a $7,000 golfer in Jason Day's perspective and Max Homa being in the lower 8s, there's still some playability and you're going to get unique. Like, I don't think any of those guys are going to garner a ton of ownership just because of the lack of success that we've seen. And the one answer that you're going to hear over and over again on podcasts is look at course history. Look how players have produced. Well, Jason Day and Adam Scott were players that had success at the Masters. Jason Day's having sex a million times, I think. He has like 10 kids at this point. But I've done that like 6 times on a podcast. I don't know why success turns into sex when I try to say it.
I mean, at the end of the day, it is. Success is sex. So, and it got DJ out of the Masters. So it's not the best thing to have at the Masters at times. So,
no,
terrible situation there, Spence.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to the ability to spike is very intriguing for me. So if the ownership is low enough, I'm always willing to jump in on some of those plays, because now all of a sudden, if I view Jason Day as being a contrarian option, or I view Max Homa as being a contrarian option, now we're starting to make a build that is vastly different for Scottie Scheffler. If you want to talk about actual lineups that can succeed and still have that upside to there, that to me is separating from the ownership that's going to be Theegala and Connors and Siwoo and the same names over and over again, to where I don't want the same dependency that 10,000 other people have, like of the first 3 names that I'm taking. Like, I want to be creative and unique. So I think that I know we keep circling back to Scottie here, but when you produce top 5 finish after top 5 finish, at some point, if you want to play him, you're just going to have to find a way to get unique and different. So I'm just trying to point out other options here, but I don't know how we got onto this rant after it was a Rory McIlroy discussion that we were having originally with it, but
it's lineup construction. It's the master, Spencer. It doesn't matter how we got you. It's how we're going to enjoy going forward. No matter what we've done, we can't change a single thing. We're going to have sex. We're going to have success. It's going to be a good week at the Masters, particularly those at Augusta. I did want to mention that Jason Day is one of the few guys in this field since 2017 in my database. I've got 13 guys, because remember I mentioned I need you to have finished second or first in a major since 2017 in order to be on my betting card. Jason Day does. He fits the mold, right? He's had a first or a second recently. It was at the Open Championship actually last year. So it wasn't like that long ago. So I like that a lot about him. We know he is a major champion too, right? So there's a lot to like about J Day. He also would have made the mix on your 7 deadly sins, Spencer, had it not been for about a vertigo. So just some fun stuff on Jason Day. He's phenomenal around here. I was taking a look at strokes gained around the green in majors. He leads the field since 2017 around Augusta. That's essential. So lots of good stuff about Jason Day. So little quick fun facts on him there.
Remove the vertigo bout that he experienced there. And if you want to base this off of a 3-year running perspective, it would be a 5th place before that. And every single finish between 2011 to 2019, didn't play it in 2012. I think that's the only year he missed. Doesn't have worse than a 28th place finish. So I think Day's going to go overlooked in DFS. I think he's very intriguing this week. And I've kind of become this person to where I know it became the running gag that Spencer is on Jason Day and Spencer loves Jason Day. I really don't play him all that often, despite me going haywire with comments and pretending like I'm on him every single week. It's like, it's my favorite golfer, or was my favorite golfer at the time. And, it was a name that, hey, pair him and Windham Clark together. That sounds like a match made in heaven.
Dude, it is. I think that's a good way to get different. I really do. $7,700 for Jason Day. Joanne mentioning Windham, Hideki, Xander start might be the way to go. Kind of going with a casual little bit of a 99, 9,000 start, kind of avoiding that entire top 10 range there. By the way, since 2017, Xander Schauffele leads the field. If you grab my model there, he can find this information in my model, which as part of a PGA Premium subscriber, you got my stuff, Spencer stuff. You can find all this information at your fingertips using code MASTERS for 30% off. Xander, Spencer, he's been incredible in majors, man. It's been a phenomenal situation from him. 73% of his majors are top 20s. So, I mean, to me, at this price, $9,900, he's going to give you that floor. We're going to be disappointed, but he's not like 11-2. He's not 12-1. Like, don't need him to win. You just need him to finish second, which you're probably going to do. Figure out the other 5 guys to win the tournament for you. What do you think?
I think Xander's going to win.
Ooh. Why? What about what we've seen on Sundays changes your opinion on that? Maybe Stephan Jaeger, maybe Akshay Bhatia.
One of the things that I've been running in my model, and I've been doing it for the last couple events because I found it to be a very interesting return. We saw it with Jaeger a little bit. There are certain names that when we look at, and I know Augusta in general, I think sometimes Rory can be too aggressive here. I think a name like Bryson DeChambeau can be too aggressive here. They have all the distance and the strokes gained acumen that you would want, but there's certain things that when Rory puts up that double or triple bogey, he takes himself out of the tournament. I think when we look specifically at Xander, the thing that was the most interesting, because I heard him give the answer that he's playing to win golf tournaments. And I heard that and I said, no, he's not. And we had the discussion on the show that no, he's not. And I think you can make an argument that on Sunday, maybe some of that goes away. Maybe this is a situation where I need to run things for like every single day specifically to see where his game plan actually goes. And maybe that's where the problem's coming into play. But when I ran this just purely for aggression in my model, Xander was third in this field. Number 1 was Rory. Number 2 was Cameron Young. Xander was third. So the Cameron Young Xander thing is not exactly what you think of when you think of win equity, but I think these are 2 guys that maybe have been on the bad end of variance in some of these spots. There has not been a player, Byron, in a year plus that when I ran this purely from an upside perspective has graded above Scottie Scheffler for me. And Xander did that this week. First in my model from proximity over 200 yards in 2024. First in my model for weighted proximity from 150 to 175 over a 2-year running perspective. Same grade there for expected par 3 and par 4 scoring. He's top of my list for weighted scrambling, and he's the number 1 projected strokes gained total person in my sheet. 42 consecutive cuts, the 3 top 5 finishes in a row, or out of the 3 of the last 4, sorry. I understand that there's been something to be said on Sundays where this has not come to fruition. I think when we're talking specifically DFS here, you hit it on the head. You don't necessarily need that win equity, and that's why he's going to be very popular. Come in second, third place, you're going to get what you want out of him, and everything's fine. When we're talking specifically from the outright market here, I grabbed him at 22 to 1 last week. That number is plummeting as we speak. I have seen this as low as 12 to 1 at some shots. I still think you can get a 16 to 1 out there, but I think there's a legitimate reason why he's moving. This is not just square money pushing this down. Everybody that cannot win has this stigma attached to them until they finally get across the finish line. Xander's now a 30-year-old. He's been around. He's been in this game for a while. He's had a bunch of close calls. You hope that he doesn't have this stink on him to where he goes into these spots and he cannot close a golf tournament. And maybe that's where the problem ends up arising because it has been so many times over and over again. But I very rarely have somebody in my model that my data likes as much as it did Xander this week. I know I've fallen into this trap so many times, Byron. It reaches a point where at some moment it's like, my outright betting card, Xander, Rory, Fitzpatrick. Can you find like less perceived win equity on the top than Rory and Xander?
At Augusta, yes. I think I would say those 2 have been the biggest letdowns based off what we're expecting from them, based off expectations. Just if you look at them in a holistic realm, we've got these guys just finishing inside the top 10, like monotonously. I think that's the thing. It's tricky, dude. It's so tricky. And Spence, I was waiting for Akshay to blow it. He He didn't really. Then he kind of followed up. But Akshay, after multiple Sundays, just getting stuck in neutral in the second last group, kind of, I mean, he could have got stuck in neutral and still won that thing by 2. But hey, you know, like he did enough to get the job done. Sometimes you break through.
Who hurts their shoulder celebrating?
Dude, there's been a lot of infamous celebrations, man, but it wasn't. There's been ones where you see like, okay, you should never have celebrated that hard. I feel like I could celebrate harder just like watching my wife play bingo than Akshay did with my left arm, and he's left-handed. You know, like just a freak accident. That was so bizarre, dude, because he didn't even try that hard.
Weird motion he put himself into, I guess, is what it was with it. But yeah, that was a weird situation. I think when we are talking about some of these players, though, that have this lack of perceived win equity, and you can tell me where I am wrong on this, but you get this public disdain that occurs in a lot of these spots. Like, that's always going to be the rebuttal where I'm going to cherry pick a name here. I think this player is a great fit for Augusta, and I understand why he's priced the way he is. But take a Jordan Spieth, for example. There's a lot of people that would rather just bet Jordan Spieth at 18-1, 20-1, whatever the number's actually at. And when he doesn't produce, the answer becomes, okay, well, I bet him at 20-1. He blew up, but he had won the Masters before, and he's been inside the top 5 numerous times at this tournament. That was a good bet. And that's kind of the rebuttal that takes place. But then when somebody goes and bets Rory or Xander or one of these names, Xander blows up on Sunday and ends up coming in 7th place or 3rd place or whatever the number ends up being. And the narrative becomes, well, I told you so. This was a terrible bet. I think that when the week started, a lot of that public narrative was baked into the equation. I think that's why Xander opened at 22-1. I kind of made the argument throughout the whole week and even last week dating back to this, that give Xander one victory at any point in the last 6 months. I think he's 14-1 in this tournament probably. And that's where we're trending right now. I think when you open at 22-1, it's all that baked in negative outlooks that are on him that are coming into play. Like, I don't know if you have what a proper number, like, forget the lack of perceived or your lack of perceived win equity on Xander. Like, do you have a proper number on Xander? Or is this just a situation that it doesn't matter what your model spits out, because until you show me that you can win, I am out? Which I assume that's the answer, but
I think that's just the thing with me, Spence, is between Cantley and Xander, they have to win twice if you've been betting these guys on a 12 rolling basis to recuperate your money. I'm just kind of just avoiding that in a way. You know, like I just make up rules. I'll hardly ever, you know, and I say hardly ever bet Hideki. I'm going to need you to chat to me about Hideki, because we want to chat about Hideki at 9K. I am seriously considering going to him. And I know that the numbers have drifted. I'm going to be looking at a 25-1 on Hideki at the Masters. I'm considering it, Spencer. And just before we get off of Xander, I've bet Xander Schauffele. I'll tell you this to answer your question. I have an 8-1 plus 800 at Bet365 for Xander finish inside the top 20 in every major this year. To me, that's how I want to attack him in that way. I feel I am completely comfortable going there. I would bet him at minus 175 to finish inside the top 20 straight up right now, because I feel like his major top 20 rate has been incredible. Spencer, you mentioned he'd go to 14 if he had won in the last 6 months. I think if he wins, he goes to single digits. Honestly, because he's second this year in strokes gained behind Scottie. If Scottie Scheffler didn't exist, he would be the best golfer in this field statistically. He is always in the mix. He's been, if you look at his track record, like just go to his data golf profile, it's as green as the background of this Masters like template we have up here. It's dark ass green. It's so consistent, which makes him not winning that much more frustrating. He's not achieving his potential. His parents are very disappointed in him. They're not mad. They're just disappointed.
I think when you look at some of the sharper markets out there and where numbers are moving, you very well might be correct with that assessment that you just gave, because take a shop like Bookmaker, for example. Bookmaker has Scottie at 4.8-1, Rory at 11-1, Third favorite, Xander at 12.5 to 1. Those are numbers that have been pushed down throughout the day. So if he's getting pushed down to 12.5 to 1 at a major championship when we have not seen him win on tour since 2022, any victory probably does put him in that range where he's probably a 9 to 1 golfer. So
yeah,
I also think that there's, with that answer being said, there's always this built-in hold percentage that's taking place. And at 9 to 1, I wouldn't necessarily have the value there. I think 14 to 1 is more of where the proper price probably is with the victory. So if they wanted to base them at 9 to 1, I would be out on that number. And that's kind of where value comes into play in these situations. But I don't know. Like for me, it's one of those things where I know what I'm getting into with this bet. It's one of those situations. It happens every single Masters to where on Thursday, it's why did you bet Rory? Why did you bet Xander? It's usually Finau too. You usually can throw Finau into that mix and Cantlay. Those are usually the four that are on my betting card every single Masters. And by Thursday, I'm out of the running. Or if I am still in it, Xander finds a way or Rory finds a way to blow it late. But
I don't know, Bud. You're gonna say that on a show, and then the following week there's gonna be 1 week where you aren't. Like if you're feeling an inkling, go your direction. Like I'm not stopping. I'm gonna give you why I'm not gonna follow you.
It makes logical sense.
The statistics are there, and at some point, maybe he finds himself 5 shots or 4 shots back on a Sunday. In my opinion, that's like position A1 for Xander on a Sunday going into Augusta. If he's like 8 groups ahead of the leaders or whatever, I can see him going and winning this thing and wearing that jacket for like half the afternoon before anyone even like gets finished, So it's totally what Xander Schauffele can do. It's on the cards. It's a possibility. There's a alternate reality where that exists. I just think it requires the cards to fall in a very specific way.
Let's talk a little bit about Hideki, because you bring up a lot of great points about Hideki. And I think from a value perspective, like you talked about Brooks, and I'm never really a Brooks person. And I get myself caught on shows. And I don't know if there's a golfer that I have faded more than Brooks that has just burned me major championship after major championship. Like even when he was on the PGA Tour, my numbers didn't necessarily love him. I always thought he was a great fade candidate to take on, and he would go out and win multiple PGA championships, and he's just winning a ton of events in a row when these events mattered more with it. But if I was to directly compare Koepka versus Hideki, I think Hideki's the right side. Like I like Hideki this week. Hideki's probably one of the better values on the board that we're talking about here. Like I think if you're trying to build a card and you listen to let's just say what you've said and what I've said, and you're like, I'm not betting Rory. I'm not going to fall into that game. I'm not going to bet Xander. I've seen what happens on Sundays frequently enough. I think there's a lot of reasons to like Hideki and really consider. I know he's not one of the names that made the finale of my 7 deadly sins. Like he got booted, and I can tell you what he got. I assume it's for 3-putt percentage would be my
very likely. Yeah. But Spencer, I was looking at around the green play and approach play in these majors. Jesus Christ and crackers. Does Hideki Matsuyama just absolutely go nuclear in these? He loves a good major. And I feel like we haven't seen Hideki with this kind of, it's been an inkling of form, but he's starting to trickle in with these top 10s, man. Like if you look at the last 12 months, it's not the greatest, but since the Genesis, basically, it's been very good form. I'm seeing 22s. I should have pulled the trigger on a 20. Geez, man, like a 22 to 1 is tricky. I have, like if I'm in on Willie Z at 35, if I'm in on Brooks at 20, if I want to play Fitz at 35, Spencer, would you rather play Fitz at 35 or Hideki at 22?
I think it's probably Fitz. I mean, like that's a route that I had a decision on. I guess my card was already built up top, and I didn't have room to get to Hideki, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I went the Fitz route. I'm a little bit overexposed on my card to begin with. I normally don't like to have over a unit in exposure pre-tournament, and I'm at like 1.04 units to win 7. So it's the Masters. I'm kind of picking and choosing some of these spots here where I'm willingly, I will be honest on a show, I'm willingly being more aggressive than I normally would be because it's such a big tournament here. And I found value spots that I did have, and each one of those numbers, I had a proper value to make the ticket and make the wager on it. But I normally don't like to have that much exposure on a card, but Just for the sake of the discussion that we had, Hideki missed the 7 deadly sins because he was 51st in this field in 3-putt avoidance. He missed it by 1 spot.
Oh, wow.
Like if all of a sudden we can just, and there's a reason why I set a certain threshold return on it. And every time I've done that, it's landed correctly. But you have a couple players in this tournament that Hideki being one from the 3-putt percentage. I think Windham Clark and Aberg, maybe more so the Windham Clark. I'm still going to stand on the Clark answer, but I think Aberg with having Skovron on the bag, I think that's very interesting for him where there will be Augusta national experience. There are certain players that can break that run that my article has put together. I think when we're looking specifically for outright betting, like that's the reason why they missed one way or another with it. And I also with Hideki, I guess like the only other negative that I had that really pushed me against them was some of the par 5 projected numbers when I ran it weighted for Augusta. Not the best returns, like nothing that would necessarily 100% get me off of him for the way that he's playing. But when I'm looking for a specific skill set, like his weighted par 5 scoring drifted outside of the top 40 for me. So I do think that there are a couple red flags that come into the mix for him, but really good, safe profile of a golfer. He's going to be popular. Yeah. He's way too cheap for DFS. I wish they could redo this pricing. And if you could have flipped him and like Windham Clark or something,
yes.
I still don't know if people want to play Windham Clark at 9,000, and at least at 10,000, it would have made a decision on Hideki there.
Yeah, he's going to be very popular, Spencer. I've made up my mind. I'm not going to bet him outright. I just can't get there at the 22. I am going to bet Hideki to finish top 20 at -140. I'm taking a look here. I spent 6 hours and 40 minutes on a Friday night, all on my own behind this computer screen doing research. Go check it out on Back 9 Bets. 9 of his last 10 Masters, top 20, Hideki Matsuyama.
It shows in my model the way I ran it too. When I ran it from a safety perspective, 1 Scheffler, 2 Rahm, 3 Hideki. Yeah. If we believe that answer is correct, and I mean, you always have to take things with a grain of salt with it. I think numbers change and things move, and you always like I probably more so than most people, I'm very reliant on my model, and I trust the numbers that it spits out in these spots. But I mean, favorite in Scheffler, second favorite give or take in Rahm, a name of Hideki that is further than a lot of these other names like the Rorys and the Xanders that I like. I just think when we're talking, and I know it's a weird argument to make, like purely upside in these spots, I still like Rory and Xander. And for me, like the best way I would explain this, and I know this is a very weird answer to give, like Rory to me is the epitome of high variance. You hear volatility, you always think the worst of that answer when that comes into play, but I think the volatility that he brings is actually a good thing for DFS here if it means that the ownership gets reduced. Like, I don't even want to talk about this from an outright betting perspective for a second with him.
Yeah.
If his ownership can be subdued, and I don't know if it's going to be, because I just so happen to be the biggest sicko of everybody that we're talking about. Like, I said it on an Action Network show last week. My exact comment was, Rory is going to, out of contention on Sunday, shoot himself up the leaderboard, and I will be sold just like that and jump back in. Sure enough, that's exactly what he did.
Yes.
If you start predicting these things, it probably means that like what is happening is not a good outcome if you're like able to just every single time narrow it down to that answer. But I think volatility in the spot is a good thing. It's just how many people are going to also, I talked myself into it Sunday as it was happening. Who talks themselves into it on Monday? Who does it on Tuesday? Who on Wednesday night is fiddling with their lineups and go, this might actually be Rory week. And then all of a sudden Rory ends up 25% owned, and where you think you had leverage in the spot, you end up having absolutely none because it just turns into this onslaught of Rory ownership that it's like the secret. It's like, I don't want to talk about like politics necessarily, but it's like where people don't want to say what line they're actually, or what party they're actually voting for in some of these spots. Yeah. And so it's like, nobody will actually give the answer. And then the election happens and it's like, well, how did this person or that person get so many votes? I feel like that's what happens with Rory. Nobody actually wants to be the one that admits like, hey, I'm betting Rory or I'm playing Rory. And I'm the person that just is like, hey, fuck it, I'm going to do it anyway. But
dude, the world's full of closet Rory betters and DFSs, right? It's just how it is. And you do it from the shadows, you do it from despair, where there's like hardly any cell service. You click him in there, make sure you get him in there, because that's how you always want to feel hurt when dealing with Rory. It just seems like since it's been tricky. So for me, it's Spencer, we're 50 minutes in and we haven't even got out of the 9K range because it's the Masters. And we've got all the best golfers in the world for the first time. So Joe Nicey's turning in his Tennessee bed right now. It's okay, Joe. It's the Masters. We are enjoying ourselves. We're speaking about all the best golfers playing the very first tournament since 9 months ago. It's just fun to chat about. So we're going to have a fun time. Time is not of the essence on the Rotoballer PGA show this evening. We're going to get to as many guys as we need to, regardless of how long it takes. So just beware of that. Let's chat about Will Zalatoris, Spencer. I have to chat about this guy. He leads the field in strokes gained majors. Over his 33 rounds of major golf, I think he withdrew from the Open he was like contending and then hit a ball through a wisp of grass and like nicked his back up. And long story short, he landed up withdrawing from the Masters last year. So this was a year ago to basically this week. He withdrew from the Masters and now is back as the best major golfer of his 33 rounds. I would say Willie Z is in the mix. He's been incredible around this venue. He also leads in his 8 rounds of golf, has gained the most strokes around Augusta. $9,200. I'm so happy he putted like crap a week or two ago. It's going to, give us 3 or 4% less Will Zalatoris ownership. I'm in. This dude is it's a mentality thing. If you think about the Xander argument, this is the exact opposite. And the reason why I like Will Zalatoris is just because of he has told us he lives for 4 tournaments. These are them.
Yeah.
What's your take on him?
These are the episodes that we do together that I seem to like the best, because there are some weeks where we are in lockstep agreement with what it is. I remember the very first show that we did together, and I don't think we had one play. We ran through like 156 players, and if I said I liked them, you hated him.
It was the Master Show last year. I had you on.
No, well, exactly. I guess whatever the way that we're running our models, then when it comes to the Masters here, we seem to have different outcomes. I understand your reasoning with Zalatoris. I guess for me, the problem is I think a lot of that's baking in the course history. And I do like that, like from the answer that you've given, he has been dominant with his approach game before he got hurt and then since coming back. Like, I mean, he is just gaining at like a very fast rate. Like if you look at the last 4 tournaments, 5.3, 3.5, 2.3, 1.8. I think when you lose 7 strokes with the putter, it kind of masks some of what the actual outcome was with it. But I don't know, Byron, like when I ran this from an upside perspective and when we get this ownership that we're getting, like to me, this ends up being better cash game play than it is for upside in these spots. My model didn't like him on bent grass greens. It didn't necessarily like him on some of these quicker surfaces. I think if there's a player that's going to ball strike the hell out of it and come out here and lose 15 strokes around the green and putting and either miss the cut or end up coming very at the bottom of the leaderboard of the people that make the cut, this feels like one of those Will Zalatoris specials. But, you say that and it's the answer for Hideki. It's the answer for Fitzpatrick. I know those are vastly different players from one another there, but you put them on more challenging courses and for some reason they shoot up the leaderboard in these spots. And Zalatoris has shown that historically. And I talked about Koepka being a blind spot for me a lot of these occasions. I haven't necessarily had the same problem. I feel like more often than not, I'm on the right side of Zalatoris, but I don't know, like 22nd in my model overall, 40th for upside, 17th for safety. I just didn't have enough for me that wanted to play him over the Jordan Spieth, the Victor Hovland's, the whoever's really in that range from a couple $100 one way or another.
That's fair. Just to chat about just about his putting in majors. He's in 33 rounds of golf out of everyone playing this week. He's gained the 7 most strokes putting in majors. He's second in strokes putting at the Masters. Like, it's the weirdest thing, Spencer. It doesn't make any sense. He's so bad at putting, but yet he's set top 10 in majors when it comes to putting. And I wonder, Spencer, if it's got to do with the mindset again, because he knows, okay, I've got myself a 20-foot, a 15-foot putt for birdie. If I don't make this, it's not the end of the world. I don't have to get to 22 under par. Maybe it's just the fact that he knows I'm going to afford myself like 50 of these things this week. I'm going to make 15 to 20 of them. And that's cool. Like, I don't know if the math makes sense with those numbers, but the major will. Like, this dude is it's crazy.
I know the data doesn't necessarily show it in my model right now, which is one of the things that hurts him, but historically a good lag putter in a lot of these spots for the reasons that you're talking about. And when you create more opportunities than your competitors, you kind of said it best. You don't need to make as many putts to actually skyrocket yourself up the leaderboard. I have concerns in some other areas also. It's not just that, but I mean, if we're looking in the 9,000 and up range, there's nobody lower. I mean, what does that put us at there? Like 20 golfers, give or take, maybe a little bit less than that, 15 golfers. I mean, I don't have anybody lower than 22nd in my model. It just so happens that Zalatoris is the lowest in that output for me.
Hey, it's all good, dude. We'll wait and see how it goes. I'm up, you're down. It is what it is. Couldn't get to Hideki. I'm in on Willie Z. Jordan Spieth, Spencer, I'll be betting him top 5 and leaving it at that. To me, I run these things where I kind of see how much money each guy's done, but backing him in different markets. Jordan Spieth's most profitable market now after last week is the top 10. But if you were to look at Jordan Spieth in majors, it looks like you definitely want to be going to Jordan Spieth from a just pretty much top 20 perspective. He tends to find himself in the mix there all the time. So we'll wait and see there, but I'm going to be going to him top 5 at Augusta. I just feel like that's just the bet, in the 9K range for me.
I think that makes complete sense with Spieth. It's a boom or bust option. When he hits, he goes up the board. When he doesn't, he misses the cut. And just to answer Sean's question, I saw you put it in what my outright bets were. A lot of these numbers have moved, unfortunately. Like that's part of the process here where things shift. And I got Xander at 22-1. I got Rory at 12-1. I got Fitzpatrick at 50-1. Those 3 numbers, for the most part, have been completely beaten down. I do think you can still find Rory if you shop around at around that 12-1 number, but Fitz has gone from 50 to the 35. Xander's gone from 22 to, you might be able to find 18, but you're probably more in that 16-1 range.
Yeah, it's sneaky. Dude, I'm still contemplating Fitz at even 35 though, Sean. I think I'm going to potentially pull the trigger on that. Let's chat about him, Spencer, a little bit in kind of, go from this range up as we go to the top of the 8s. Fitzy, in my tweet out about the model and stat buffet, if you take a look at Matthew Fitzpatrick, he's gained the second most strokes off the tee around Augusta. That's kind of crazy, isn't it? If you think, like, it makes sense, but also he hasn't been the Fitz that we know now pretty much since he's been playing Augusta, which is still, it shows you that his driver has kind of, and he hits that draw, right? That little, he does like to hit that ropey draw, which is good for Augusta. So maybe the end game for Matthew Fitzpatrick is always to win the Masters.
It feels like an ideal course setup. I've written that in a couple articles already, that I know he has a major championship, but if you would have asked me, like, now that we have this distance answer that comes into play with him, where he actually has the prerequisite that you're looking for distance, and one of the 9 names for me every single year, Fitz usually gets cut because of the lack of distance when I run the 7 deadly sins. He didn't get cut this year with it. And, back-to-back top 14 finishes, 14th and 10th there. Positive trajectory in my model pretty much any way that I ran it. And I think for me, like, we can talk about that extensive training where the distance that he has added. But for me, when I looked at this, the biggest takeaway, and you're going to hear this on a lot of shows, but I think it's a very noteworthy point, Byron, to discuss here. He added a 4-gram weight to his driver. He had forgotten to remove it for almost a year. I know we talked about this last week on the show. That's a shockingly bad mistake for someone that's going to be tracking every single shot in his notebook, but it really does help to explain this erratic nature that he's experienced since that victory at the Heritage last season. If you want to just like dive into that data a little bit more, he's gained 0.91 strokes off the tee per event over his past 6 starts. That's when he, according to what he has said, removed the weight from his driver. If you look at what he had done before that, losing 0.875 in 8 appearances off the tee there. I just think that if you're going to give me a real off the tee profile from him from a golfer that is trending positively in that direction to begin with, who now has the distance to actually win this tournament. He has the short game you need. It's the hard course player.
Scoring.
The sky is the limit. And I think it makes complete sense why this number is plummeting in this space. I bet him top 20 at plus 130. I think that price is even down a little bit now, maybe into like the 120 range, I want to say the last I looked. I still have value in that price there. I thought Fitz was one of the better values on the board, and there is legitimate win equity that we're talking about with him on a golfer that even in DFS circles here, he is way too cheap at 7,900. That's probably going to be one of those spots that I am going to eat the ownership unless it just becomes such an exorbitant amount. But I think even still, I'm going to trust my data and the numbers that are trending in a positive direction and aggressively back Fitzpatrick as much as I can this week.
I would too. And you know what? I would too. I am too. While you were chatting, Spencer, I am officially in on Matt Fitzpatrick at 40 to 1.
41's a good price.
40 at FanDuel. It's out there right now. So I put my $25 on that to win my $1,000 back for the Masters. Do you change how much you bet, Spence? I know you're a professional bettor and you kind of make a living off of this versus me kind of just betting my hourly salary at Accounting World. And I bet double for the Masters and for the majors, and particularly the Masters. I will have an extensive secondary betting card that won't be official, but it will be very maniac induced. There will be hole-in-ones. The Masters this week for me, I go off the freaking rails. I drink Keystones. I do everything that I love to do. I indulge in the 7 deadly sins of the maniac world, Spencer. I presume you treat it as a normal week from a betting perspective.
Yeah, every tournament, whether it's the Masters or it's the Barracuda, they all get treated the same way. It's where I can find my value. I build my card that way. The only difference that I would say, it's to win the same amount as I would always do. I normally am in a spot where in an ideal world, I'd like to be 0.7 of a unit or less to win 7 to 8 units or more. Okay. This is a week where the 3 outrights I have were to win around 7 and my exposure is 1.04 units. So I have about a quarter more risk in play than I normally would for a lot of these events. Kind of talked about that at the beginning, just with this being the Masters, but like for me, that quarter of a unit investment, I think is well worth it from a content creation standpoint. Yes. One, it allows more people for us to be able to talk about when I still have value in the number, not talking about people that I don't actually have value on the price. But 2, it puts us in a spot where, we've talked about this before, Byron, like hitting a major means a lot in the space. Like it's something that matters. So yeah. I'm a little bit more aggressive trying to chase that outright victory this week than I normally would be. And really where I ran into a problem with it is when I decided to bet Rory. Like the card was fine until Rory got added to the mix, because that was just such a upfront exposure risk when you're taking a golfer at 12 to 1, and it really starts eating into what you're capable of doing outside of that. Because wasn't necessarily the plan, but like 0.58 units to win 6.96 is what I went there with him. And that's kind of where I want to be at from an outright allocation. So when that's one player is giving me that, it's kind of where we're at. Like it's the Rory dilemma of Augusta.
Exactly, Spencer. And as if I'm doing this emotionally and alcoholically, you're doing it for a bit of socially, like this. We all have our reasons to go a little overboard when it comes to the Masters. It's totally fine. I encourage sensible and responsible gambling. I promote it thoroughly, and try and with Breaking 100, use your $100 every week. The Masters, it's $200, and if you're feeling frisky, $300 is fine too. Make sure that you have enough to bet. Don't bet any money you can't afford to lose, and just have a fun time. It's the Masters. Let's chat about a random bet quickly, Spencer, that I know has got nothing to do with a single golfer, but it's got to do with every single golfer. It's betting hole-in-ones for every single day and betting hole-in-ones to happen twice in the tournament. I know it's completely degenerate, Spence, but if you're looking to keep yourself captivated, if you're looking to keep yourself focused on the TV the entire time, you get all 4 of the par 3s are on some sort of a stream between the channels that the Masters apps offer. You can have all 4 par 3s on TV, so you can bet them to hit a hole-in-one. Every time a single person steps on the tee for that hole, you've got yourself a sweat. To me, that's the best bet in golf outside of outrights and things, because it's every single shot. Scott, I mean, let's say Vijay Singh could absolutely thin a 3-iron on a par 3 and make an ace, and you yelling out of your bridges because you just cashed an ace punch, So the Sunday sweat, on 16 is always fun too, because that's in a spot that's just typically just always going to be an ace. So bet the aces. I will have exactly how I bet them out in my Breaking 100 article coming out tomorrow, which will be my normal card and everything degenerate from then on out. So we'll make it maybe like, what can we call the Breaking 100 degenerate part? Like broken free 100 kind of thing, running free 100. I don't know, but we'll have to wait and see there, Spence.
What are we just out of curiosity, just to like dive a little bit deeper into, because it's so not a market that I'm ever in. Like, what are we looking at when it comes to hole-in-ones at Augusta on those 4 holes?
From what I remember a while ago, I found 14 in round 1, round 2, and then I think it's 8 in round 3, round 4. No, round 3 it's 8, and then round 4 it's negative odds because of 16. So you really want to make sure you shop around, because there are seriously different odds out there. I don't see any hole-in-one props just yet. I think it's minus 140 for the entire tournament for a hole-in-one, which bakes in Sunday. So that's definitely the way to go, because I'd bet that just for the Sunday hole location. I don't see any hole-in-ones anywhere though, looking at it now.
All right, let's. I brought it up. I don't know if this is accurate, but the 4th hole, it looks like only one person has won that. I don't know if that's accurate.
Corey Connors.
Corey Connors did the 6th hole in 2021. Before that, Jamie Donaldson in 2013. The 12th hole, Curtis Strange in 1988 looks to be the last one. 16 is where you're going to have to get it on Red Bud.
Yeah.
Fleetwood in 2021, DeChambeau and Thomas in 2019, Hoffman in 2018, Kuchar in 2017, Shane Lowry, Davis Love III, Louis Oosthuizen in 2016. So that's going to have to be the hole where I guess you get there with it. I'm always interested when we dive in deeper into numbers, like what the actual hit percentage is.
Spence, the chance of you losing money on the par 3 bets is likely, but you're going to literally every single time you're looking at the TVB bet, like trying to win the bet, like to me, that's the price of admission. I'd walk out and pay it again, for once I've broken the seal. That's how much I enjoy betting that hole-in-one bet. I'll
consider doing it if you somehow bet Xander.
I told you I'll bet Xander top 20s. We're rocking and rolling all day.
It has to be Xander. It has to be Xander to win. We'll have the discussion off air.
Xander outright and to make a hole-in-one. I'm in. No, we'll wait and see there. Spence, anyone you want to kind of touch on before we get out of the 9s?
No, probably not. Niemann, I'm curious to see where Niemann's ownership lands. I do think right now he's the hottest player on LIV. We see that with the results he's producing, and great short game. He's been historically great at some of these quicker tests. Think like Genesis Invitational and some of those venues. So I think Niemann makes a lot of sense for why people are backing him. We talked about this last week. I don't love that the outright number plummeted the way that it did. It was a much different bet when this was 100 to 1 or 50 to 1. Do think a lot of the value has been taken out of the mix now where we're at, but it's another thing where Niemann left as one of the best young golfers on tour, and we don't really know because he's playing in, like, I don't want to call it exhibition golf, but it's not necessarily week in, week out golf. And there's a legitimate argument to be made that Niemann has just become a top 3 player in the world at this point, and people don't realize it until he wins a major championship. So I do think, like, if anybody wants to play Niemann, that makes sense. Outside of that, though, as I said, I'm not going to talk about Cantlay. Like, I can't get myself to do it on another major podcast.
No, we can leave Cantlay alone. I think Hovland's form just entering the week, despite being amazing in majors and things like that. Ownership dependent on Hovland. Let's chat about Niemann before we get out of here.
Let's talk about one more person too, and we actually will get out of the 9,000 to move forward. But
we got so much going on. I love it, Spencer. Like, this has been, I've had a blast. My anxiety about getting the show done under a certain time period has now evaporated. But Niemann, like I mentioned, a first or second for the Masters or for the Open, 17 of 19 of the last 10 years worth of guys have finished first or second in a major. Joaquin's best finish was last year's Masters and 16th. You know, like even top 10s. I think the top 10 was like the magic number that pretty much encompassed every single golfer outside of Colin and Windham Clark. So in the last 39 instances, 37 guys have finished inside the top 10 of a major before winning that major that year. You know, so to me, that makes me feel so much more comfortable not betting Joaquin Niemann to win the tournament. I will bet him top 10. What is Joaquin Niemann for a top 10? I feel like that's probably the next progression in his game and major career. And that's one way to get, you know, take advantage of him from an upside perspective, despite not winning.
I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense in that regard with it. I do think he's probably a different player. He's a 25-year-old that is going to see an increase, and we just haven't necessarily gotten it. But there is a maturation process that occurs in a lot of these spots, and unfortunately, we have not necessarily gotten it. So I think from a DFS outlook, he's great, and I think from if you want to play him into like a top 10, top 20 sort of bet, that also makes a lot of sense. But yeah, it just comes down to the original answer I gave too. It's a much different bet at 25, 28 to 1 than when he was 70 to 1. So it's like when numbers move, value gets taken away. And as much as I would have put Joaquin Niemann, like we're having this discussion right now, Byron, put Joaquin Niemann at 70 to 1. He would have been the first bet I would have placed, and I would have done it in 2 seconds, and it would be to win double what I normally do. It's just value matters at the end of the day, and the value's more or less either gone or really subdued from where it was.
Yeah. So chatting about that now, the outright portion doesn't matter, but hey, who was the other guy you wanted to chat about in this range, Spence?
Just Aberg really fast. I talked about Skovron on his bag. It's going to be his first appearance. Any thoughts on Aberg, either from a game theory perspective for DFS? Anything that you have thought-wise?
Yes. Everything about Aberg, Spence, screams fade. I think the hype train is going, and it is like firing on all cylinders right now. I feel like it's overfired. $9,100 is going to be too cheap for people to resist. I think what I've noticed, Spencer, let's think about Ludvig Aberg's best performances. Wins the RSM Classic. That's a comp course for Augusta. Goes in and has one of his best finishes at Pebble Beach. That's a comp course for Augusta. Has a phenomenal finish at the Players. Another good Augusta comp course with water everywhere and forced layups. Then what? Goes to San Antonio and plays quite nicely on a golf course that requires exceptional accuracy off the tee for the most part in a relatively short golf course, despite the 4 par 5s taking care of the majority of the length there. I think people they're trying to make Aberg the golfer that we thought he was before he got on tour, where he would demolish like the Whistling Straits and the Farmers Insurances and things like that. He did play nice at the Farmers, but he's shown that his propensity to play the best golf is on these short positional tracks. I'm happy to leave him alone. It's a debut, dude. This guy could miss the cut. Tiger Woods. I did a tweet today earlier that took a look at the greatest golfers that have like played amazing golf at the Masters. They've got multiple wins. And you would take a look at Phil Mickelson's debut appearance. It's like a tie 46th. You know, like it's Jordan Spieth is like one of the few instances where it's like different, but he's Jordan Spieth, right? I mean, is Ludvig in that same realm? You tell me.
I mean, I will go with yes, which I guess is kind of the reason why I'm intrigued by it. And I do think he has experience on the bag, which is going to help in this position. The one point that you brought up that is definitely the noteworthy one above anything else, and we've discussed it on this show numerous times, for whatever reason, the club down courses far exceed what you get at some of these venues where you get these longer courses. 62nd in my model in strokes gained total on long courses. Not exactly the output that you would want to see. For me, for DFS, though, it comes down to ownership. If he can be sub 10%, he's another name for me that all of a sudden pops like into a name that I'm intrigued by because it creates leverage, and I'm all about trying to create leverage in this tournament. So that's just where we're different with it, I guess.
I'd probably say he's closer to 20% than 10%, to be honest with you, by the end of the week.
If he gets to that, then I mean, then it's a different discussion to be had, because now you're talking about a debutant that's not great on long courses historically. Early in his career, I want to note. I do think he will fix it at some point.
Yeah. There's so much talent. You know, I think he'll figure his stuff out. There's a bunch of guys in the chat chatting about guys we're going to get to. Spencer, my boy, I'll be rocking the wig tomorrow. I have a Penguin shirt that I'll be wearing. Cam Smith. $8,900. I have a 29-1 outright that I'm not even going to like mention in my Breaking 100 article. It's just like a personal bet now. I would bet him at 45 though. I think it's a weird number. He's drift. I know he's sick, but we haven't even mentioned the weather, Spencer. The first 2 days look windy. Like it looks like 15-mile-per-hour winds steadily throughout the day with some really orange like gusts. If there's a type of tournament, like that's why I really like Hideki and Fitz, is early on to like make it to the weekend. You've got to survive like some really windy. Sunday's going to be fun. It's going to be pristine, calm from what I've seen. The more you're scrambling, the more you have to chip, the more you have to putt around Augusta, the more I'm kind of in the mood for Cam Smith. So I'll be playing him for a personal bet, at 45-1. Go grab that if you're in the mood. That's just a Cam Smith truther. I'll be playing him at $8,900. He makes tons of birdies. He'll make his bogey share. He hit a few snap hooks here and there. Makes tons of birdies. The putter can get hot. The chipping is amazing. I understand the form, the sickness, the blah, blah, blah. Nothing looks good. Around this golf course, though, there's one person that I think has to win this thing before he dies, and it's Cam. More so than Rory, in my opinion. So I really want to see him doing the old man thing and see what Cam Smith's life looks like as he gets into his 80s, So who's your Rangers? Yeah, Spence in the 8s.
I think if you want to bet Cameron Smith, you can probably wait even. Like that number is just going to continuously drift. He is an underdog in every single matchup that I've seen. He's, Bryson's minus 150 against him. Dustin's a big favorite. There's
what? Bryson against Cam Smith at the Masters?
I mean, I agree with this is where I'm more on the aisle of where you're at with it. Like, I think market has overcorrected itself a little bit from Cam Smith withdrawing because, I mean, I've heard food poisoning. I don't know if that's been,
from what I've heard. Yeah.
I mean, so you have a guy with food poisoning who's coming at a course where it's wide open. It does alleviate some of those struggles with his inaccuracy off the tee. One of the best scramblers. We know that when he was on the PGA Tour. But I don't have a problem with Cam Smith. I do think he's a way to get unique and different. But I kind of like this $8,000 range. Like, I'm always going to get caught with the Finau game at Augusta. Positive leverage in my model for him. Fitzpatrick, if we go down to 7,900, is probably one of my favorite plays on the board right now. But I mean, if we're looking from like an advantage standpoint, and this is partially because of what we have seen with Bryson at Augusta, I do think he will be better this year than we've probably gotten historically. Like, I'd like to think that he's figured something out, but even with that being said, like Thomas, DeChambeau, those were the two most overpriced players for me that I had in this $8,000 range. So I'm probably out on both of them and more so can be convinced in a lot of these other routes.
Bryson, Benjamin Button, DeChambeau at Augusta, Spencer. If you could take a look at what Bryson's done, he's only got worse. The puzzle's got harder. He's lost pieces, like he can't complete it right now. So I'm out on him. I'm out on Max. I'm out on Sam Burns. Those are guys that just have never played well. Yeah, Colin Morikawa, despite playing well in majors, this bottom of this AK range is barren for me. I'm out on everyone except for Shane Lowry, who I'm very bullish on. I'll be betting top 20 for sure. The guy's a beast when it comes to top 20s in majors. He's doing it like 4 out of every 10 starts he's done. Love that about Shane, especially showing the form that he has. Like he's been ball striking it really nicely, has shown the propensity to play well at Augusta. Cam Young, Spencer. Does Cam, he's playing his 3rd Masters, bud. Does he win his, like we've been saying this, like he's 50 or 60 out there right now. He checks a lot of your boxes. I know that around the green play is a little bit of a concern for him, but at this golf course, he's typically found success, so what's your take on Cam Young? I bet him top 10 to finish inside the top 10. Yeah, I don't know what I got it at. I'll pull it up right now, but that's how I'm playing in this week is top 10.
I think if I was going to bet him, I probably prefer, and it's something that I've considered even, I think he's intriguing as a head-to-head matchup bet against Justin Thomas. I talked about the reasons why I wasn't in on Thomas this week. He split with Bones and he's entering this tournament and all sorts of whatever's going on with his game right now. Not even the reason why I'm off, but when the data also is telling me the same story, I think Cameron Young is somewhat intriguing to consider in this spot. aggressive golfer who's going to have the distance. We're going to need the around the green game to be a little bit better. But, last year, top 10 finished for him. I thought he looked great in that event. And if I recall correctly, and I only remember this because of FSGA fantasy season-long golf, I had Cameron Young in every single lineup, and he either bogeyed the final hole or like Sahith chipped in or something. But whatever the conclusion was, it swung on me. And I think that finish for Cam was even supposed to be like top 5, more in that range with it. So I don't know. I think there's ways to play Cam Young. Maybe the bet against Thomas would be the way that I prefer doing it, but there's upside with Cameron Young here. I don't sorry. It's kind of like I said, there's a talk about Cameron Young. It's like
you're getting all choked up, buddy.
Yeah, no, it's like, I think I just know what ends up happening, Byron. Like you play Cameron Young, you lose your money and you get choked up with it at the end of the day. But Cam Young is a golfer that if the pieces ever get put together, we saw it at the Open Championship where he made a run at St. Andrews there. Last year, he made a run. I do think there's a lot of upside in his game. Yeah. I don't know if that's necessarily what you historically think of when you think of matchup bets, but I'm kind of starting to talk myself into that the more that I look at my model, because there were a couple matchups for me that were very close to being worth a value on it. That Cam Young one is starting to really push into the area for me. And I'll ask you about the other one at the end of the show, because I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. But I guess that would be my long-winded answer of how I'm going to try to get exposure to Cam.
Yeah, he's sneaky. He provides you with like incredible consistency as well in these majors. It's kind of crazy. I don't know what to make of this guy, but there's only 5 other golfers who've had more top 10s, by a percentage basis than him in this field. So he also checks the box for having finished second in a major. You know what I'm saying? Like he's done that. He's part of this gang. So we'll see what he can get up to. I'm really curious about him. I'm invested. I think he doesn't win it, but he messes around, Spencer. He fucks around and finds out at Augusta this week. So that's one of the guys I'll be looking to dive into. I'm out on Colin, like I mentioned, and I'm in on Justin Thomas, Spencer, on the opposite side of that scale. I feel like he's one of these teenagers that's like, his parents should be like scolding him or like getting him in trouble for like getting home late or like, not showing up on curfew, but they got too busy because they got called into work by firing Bones. And now he's like kind of just like running rampant. Maybe he does something miraculous. I just taking a chance on like such a pivotal change in his game. I feel like entering the week, he's lost people's confidence. So I feel like this kind of a change to me, if he's $8,700 and 10-12%, I'm in on Justin Thomas. I can totally see him doing something completely berserk and random. I can also totally see him missing the cut. Like both of those are very much on the cards. Who the heck knows?
I think part of that reason probably is why a matchup bet against him was the route I was going with Thomas. Because I agree. He has the ability. He can string together birdies and high-end performances as well as anybody else when he's on. But the off-the-tee stuff, not good the last 4 events. The putter, not good at all. That putter's gone ice cold. And even the around the green game that has, historically been very good for him, not necessarily where we want it to be at this point either. So I think we maybe had a little bit too much of like a resurgence feel from him to where everybody thought he was back. And now, we've kind of realized, that, he's more back than he was, but there's still some flaws in the game. I agree, though. He's one of those boom or bust commodities that at the right ownership percentage, I think you can consider him for DFS, but I also don't think he's going to be, he has to be, I would think 8 to 10%, right? Like I would want him sub 5% if I was even going to consider it.
Yeah. In this field, I'm kind of thinking that in a normal field, he would be 5 to 8 to 10. I would be shocked if he's single digits, but he's around Dustin Johnson, who I think will be a little bit popular this week. I don't know how I feel about DJ. I don't know what to make of a lot of these live guys. I've got a few takes on them, but that's about it. Any other guys in this 8K, Spence?
No, I see Lowry up in the chat. Lowry's playing good golf right now. My model's never really a Lowry person, but you got to like what he's producing, and his recent trends at Augusta have also been very encouraging. Like he barely missed the 7 deadly sins there, which was a very big surprise. Like there were a handful of names, him being one of them that just missed on the final category or two.
Yeah.
So,
And he finishes inside the top 10, top 20 of majors 4 out of every 10 starts. So he's like, a safe major play. Let's chat about Sahith Theegala, Spencer, making his second appearance at Augusta after a top 10 last year. The iconic Tiger Woods chip in on 16, kind of from the same spot, kind of coming down the slope there. I know the hole has changed since, but it was kind of cool to see. We've got an ethnic player on the tour doing the same kind of things as Tiger, and it's just fun to see Sahith. He's exciting. I've always loved watching him golf. I will be betting Sahith Theegala top 5, top 10. He's not going to win it in second start, Spencer. We got to adhere to our rules. As much as I've wanted to pull the trigger on a 60-1 on Sahith Theegala, I'm trying to expose myself to as much as him as possible outside of an outright. So I'll be doing the top 5, top 10 stack. This guy's upside is incredible. And I feel like this golf course he's going to find immense success. We've always compared him to Spieth and Cam Smith in some departments, and he's arguably driving the ball better than them two right now. And if you take a look at what he did off the tee here last year, it was actually quite impressive. So a lot to like about Sahith. He actually gained the 11th most strokes off the tee, just in this field in those 4 rounds. So a lot to like, and I'll be on the record saying I'm a big fan of Jason Day this week.
Yeah, I like Jason Day. I mean, the only pushback that I would have to Theegala is he's going to be massively popular.
Bet him. That's the thing.
Yeah, I think that's the way to play it, because my model loved him. He was, where did he rank for you out of curiosity?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because I bet you my model is higher than yours is, Ethan.
Yeah, I've got him 12th.
I have him 5th overall and 13th for upside. I think betting him is the way to go, just because, it's still a volatile course. We've seen it one time there. I think there's a lot of reasons to consider him in that top 10 or 20 range, but I would not be shocked if, when push comes to shove here, he ends up being the most popular player, just because it makes it so simple to put him with Scottie and to put him with really anybody that we're talking about. Great profile though for Augusta. Like, this is wide open venue that accentuates his scrambling and around the green game. Like, I don't know if I could draw up a better course for him. So
you can't, dude. You can't. This is the course for him, dude. Like, this is it. He's gonna have so much fun around. He's gonna be the next VJ. I think I saw somebody mentioning here, Bernard Langer, RIP. No, this is the Lowry one. Where's the Langer one? Let's chat about Stephan Jaeger, because to me, we've got the German now in the field. I think Jaeger won the Houston Open to make his way into the Masters. Spencer, there's debutante betting markets out there, and a lot of people are talking about Windham Clark and Akshay. My dark horse for debutante markets is Stephan Jaeger. If you think about just booming drives off the tee, he's very crisp around the greens. He's a good long iron player. He's playing good golf right now. He's played good golf in the few majors he's played in. I don't mind Jaeger.
Yeah, what is Jaeger price-wise as top debutante?
Keep speaking about him. I will pull it up. It's 12-1. Ludvig is 275. I'm just going to pull the screen up. How does that sound? I think this is a very interesting discussion, because it really goes into, we're in the range now where top debutantes are definitely kind of needing to be discussed here. And I think he's definitely an option, in my opinion.
So my model would have Windham Clark as the favorite. It would have Aberg as the second favorite. And it would have Stephan Jaeger as the third favorite for me. So, like, price-wise at 12-1, I had it closer into that like 6.5-1 range on it. So I think value-wise, you're probably getting a good number for a golfer that, around the green and distance. Like, we want to keep crediting players like Fitzpatrick for working on their speed training. That is the Stephan Jaeger recipe for success over the last year.
It absolutely is, Spencer. It absolutely is. And this course is built for him.
It is. Yeah. Top 5 in my model and expected strokes gained around the green. Top 9 in my model when you take distance, long iron play, and aggression and merge it into one category. 17th from me in weighted strokes gained total. It's a really good output for a golfer, that's going to be making his first appearance. Like, once again, that only places behind the top 2 favorites that I talked about. So, if you have any reason to believe that either Clark or Aberg aren't going to be able to produce for any reason, then that number even gets better. And I know that you're lower on both of them and you're probably out on both of them. So like naturally it does start pushing the value in Jaeger's direction. I think 12-1. Here's the problem, Byron. I also like Højgaard. I think I need to stop with Højgaard because it's not working at this point, but that was the other name that had positive movement in my model when we're talking about pure upside here.
Yeah, well, the thing is, Spencer, there's no denying what Ludvig is. It's just his numbers aren't. There's no, from a betting perspective, there's nothing there. We're trying to make money, and at plus 275, the top debutant is about as much of a crapshoot as there is. I think I was listening to a show that said if Jonas Blix can finish second in his debut appearance at the Masters, so can Ludvig. It's like, doesn't that just go to show you how random golf is? Like, you can't just like randomly draw these associations between these guys. But the most like random people have finished high up in their first Masters. Like the guys that don't typically.
Yeah.
No, what do you think about Eckroat, Spence?
So I like Eckroat. Unfortunately, we're chasing a moving target here. We're trying to hit a moving target here. That's just like in a lot of these situations. I thought Eckroat, DraftKings had this price, and I believe it's moved at this point for him to make the cut.
Yeah.
But that was a very interesting way with the performances that we've seen for Eckroat. He was minus 110. I want to say he's moved up to 125, 130, somewhere in that range now. It's starting to kind of be a little bit too precipitous of a drop in that price to where I necessarily want to get to that value. But I think Eckroat makes a lot of sense from what we have seen from him inside of the top 45 of my model. I know that doesn't necessarily seem like some bullish return, but when we're talking about names here where most of these debutants or most of these first-time players are either outside of the top 70 for me or really don't have any positive movement that we're talking about at all, like Eckroat is one of those names where there was built-in safety for him. Højgaard might have that upside that I'm talking about, but Højgaard has no floor at this point. Eckroat kind of had that overall build of safety, upside, and everything that merged him into like a borderline top 40 player this week for me. So I don't know what the ceiling is, but I thought from like safety markets, whether that's something further down the board, like a top 40 or like a make cut, like kind of like I talked about, that's kind of where I was looking to go. But the problem is the second you run the number and then like I had a Fitzpatrick head to head that I wanted to give, and I went to go release it in the Rotoballer Discord, and I looked back and the number had already moved 20 points like 2.5 minutes later. And it's like, well, I'm not going to release a bad and stale number for everybody, but that's kind of what we're up against right now, is just this moving target that we're trying to hit in all these spots, and prices are shifting left and right.
Yeah, it's tricky, dude. But hey, speaking about our little Discord, we've got that thing renovated and ramped up now. We no longer got you on a random island now. I think you're gonna be part of the Rollerballer Discord now, Spence, which is gonna be awesome. So yeah, if you guys are in the mood to like see what me and Spence are saying behind the scenes, asking us questions in the Discord, code MASTERS, get you 30% off, get you into the Discord, get you all of me and Spencer, Joe Nicey, Joe Idoni, all of our premium stuff over at Rotoballer. Be sure to use that code MASTERS to get yourself onto our team. It's a wonderful little world. We're kind of growing there, and the Rotoballer team has been exploding this year so far. Spence.
Yeah, the Discord that we've built is great. It's going to be a massive upgrade for everybody. Yeah. I will say this secondary Discord that I had built, we had a great group over there. Windham Clark as our profile picture. He was kind of the one that we honored every single tournament with it. But, they're all those guys that we're moving on over. I mean, they're going to be a great addition to the actual Rotoballer Discord with it. So it's going to be a lot of fun, great discussions. And I think one of the things that I would tell everybody, that if you are on the fence of joining Rotoballer and you like the work Byron does, you like the work I do, and you'd love to have conversations with, but you still don't know if you want to go and actually make the purchase with it, I can't even tell you how valuable it is and how people use it in Discord. Just having conversations with each other and bouncing ideas off of one another, and the strategy and the talk that comes into play, it will turn you into a better high-level thinker just having those discussions every single week with it. So the community aspect of Rotoballer is truly a beautiful thing.
It is, man. And it's only getting better and better. So we've kind of established our little culture and we're moving it on up and day every single day. So we appreciate you that are subscribers. We appreciate you that aren't and will be soon. And even if you aren't, we still appreciate you guys tuning in and hitting that like bucket and button for us. We've had some fun mispronunciations on the show already. Spencer had the best one so far. I'm out on Tyrrell Hatton, Spencer, someone that's a very sneaky play, Sungjae Im. I think the two guys, Siwoo Kim and Sungjae, both had those military obligations that could be squashed or voided due to gold medals in the Olympics and Asian Games, which they ended up getting, and majors, winning a major. What a crazy kind of pressure to have. To me, I think that's even more pressure than Rory winning the fourth major, and completing the Grand Slam is kind of essentially not getting bullets shot at you. So I feel like Sungjae has played fantastically well at Augusta in general. Just if you take a look at his major track record, it's easily his favorite major in a big way. And I would say Siwoo Kim playing the golf he is now, the pressure of no longer having to win a major and just play well in a major might definitely help those two Koreans going forward.
The only thing I worry about with Sungjae is I am truly worried that his irons are broken at this point. 62nd in my model and weighted proximity for Augusta. This is a golfer that we're talking about that's 21st from a 2-year running perspective. Everything is moving in the wrong direction with the iron play. Like, he has lost every single event since the Farmers other than the Arnold Palmer. So what is that? That's 2, 4, 6, 7. So 7 of 8 he's lost with the approach play, and the putter has been very hit and miss for him. So that's the only negative thing I have. And I think when we're talking about some of these players down here, take a Russell Henley, for example. He's going to be popular, but that is kind of where it's a really tough decision that comes into play, because my model doesn't see this massive disparity between Russell Henley and, let's just say, Sam Burns, for example, who's $1,000 more expensive. And all of a sudden that starts pushing into this value range where Henley at the Masters has been great throughout his career. Go look at what Henley's actually produced when you get a second at Augusta. And yes, he's lacking the win equity that we're talking about, but tons of made cuts, a bunch of top 20s thrown into the mix with him. This has been a course that historically has really suited his game. And I think he is a golfer that everybody wants to use the data golf argument always, that data golf has him ranked whatever he is in the world. And I don't necessarily think that that's the best way to go about it. But Russell Henley is better than public perception. And I do think there's a lot of reasons to believe he's a good course fit for this venue this week. So I like Russell Henley. I worry about the ownership a little bit, but it's probably one of those spots where it's good chalk, in my opinion.
Yeah, again, at Augusta, there's going to be good chalk. I mean, you cannot pivot off of every single chalky guy. You will not succeed. There is a reason they're going to be chalky. It's Augusta. It's the most predictive golf course of the schedule. You have to make sure you're playing guys at this venue that are going to be chalky, because there's just a reason that they are. It's just, you cannot avoid it. Once again, repeating that fact in this show. A name that, Spencer, Tom Kim. I want to play him so much because of what we saw in the majors last year. The full swing things got me feeling a bit. He's one of the names that has a second place in a major. He finished second at the Open Championship last year. So he's got that bucket checked off. He's playing in his second start, played nicely last year, Spence. He's a superstar. He's supremely talented. He's playing like shit right now, though.
So Paul Tesori, who is now his caddy,
yes,
follows me on Twitter, and I follow him.
Yes, shocking.
I wrote an article at Rotoballer that his wife saw, tagged Paul in it, and they got a good kick out of it, and both of them followed me.
That's awesome.
But I'm saying this for a reason. This is not just to brag that Paul Tesori and I are friends. And
got to bring it up.
One step closer to Webb is obviously where I'm getting with this, and it just gets me a little bit closer there. But one of the things that I saw Paul write, he wrote a mental health coach, I believe, and said, "Hi, I'm Tom Kim's caddy. Tom is playing in the Masters next week. Can we meet with you?" I don't love that we're doing mental health work leading into Augusta. I think all the answers that you said make a lot of sense, but something is not right with him right now. Maybe that a session with this woman was enough to turn his game around, but I was expecting to want to play Tom Kim this week, and I saw that pop up. And with the form that we've seen recently, that was kind of enough for me to say, like, maybe that's even a little bit too much for me at this moment.
Yeah. I think he's likely going to be sub 10. I think I'll take that.
Good leverage.
To me screams the guy literally limped around the Open Championship and finished runner up. I'll give a crack on that guy and see what happens. It's just one of the few that I'll take a chance on. I think that's going to be how it goes. I feel like Tommy Fleetwood at $7,500 is a very interesting option from a what are we doing with Tommy Fleetwood at 75? I feel like he found a bit of form last week. I mean, a 7th last week, Spence. He's been very good in majors, just never won it. He's $7,500 though. Wasn't Tommy like 9,500 like last year?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. I mean, he was also, I know it's a much weaker field, but he was in the 9,000s last week and produced. You would think that's the name that would probably stay in the 8s. I don't know what to do with Tommy Fleetwood. My model is pretty indifferent, if we're being honest. Like 75 was about the give or take number of where it thought he should have been. 35th overall for me, 33rd for upside, 36 for safety. Those are all numbers that are a little bit worse than what we're paying there, but I don't have a massive take. This is a golfer that has historically underachieved in some of the biggest moments and doesn't have a title, but we are talking about a name that all of a sudden now it's 7,500. And what would prevent Tommy from producing a top 10?
Not a lot. I think he can do it quite easily. I feel like he could be out the mix and shoot 63 on Saturday or Sunday, like he does in every single major. Like when he's out the mix, he's out. That to me at this price, I'm totally fine taking that on because it's a likelihood. It's not a big price tag. You're not really, you're adding to your budget if he's your first click, and we've seen this guy get up. He's 18th in strokes gained in majors, 16th, like this is again, you got to kind of almost, I'm really going to be leaning into the strokes gained majors thing on guys that aren't playing the greatest right now in this cheap range, especially if you're low owned. I'll take a gamble on low owned guys. I'm not going to necessarily take the gambles on the guys that are going to be high owned.
If we look at Fleetwood here, and I'll just very quickly run through some of these matchups, take of this what you want. Not saying this is a good or a bad thing on any of these answers, but Fleetwood is plus 100 against Matthew Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick's minus 120. My model would agree. It really likes Fitzpatrick. He is minus 127 against Shane Lowry. Lowry is a guy who's $8,000 more expensive than him. So I think that's a noteworthy return from what we've gotten from Lowry here. He's also minus 125 against Sahith Theegala, who's everybody's favorite darling this week. So now all of a sudden we've thrown two names into the mix there that he's a favorite over options that people like. And he's an underdog to a sharp market mover that my model likes in Fitzpatrick. So I think from just purely movement, that tells a very nice story for us here.
Yeah. I like Fitz more than Tommy, but I like Tommy as a pivot. Like he's very likely going to be a leverage option in this range, at $7,500 too. I mean, it's tough to, imagine you speaking about that last year when he was just rattling off top 10 after top 10, it was quite crazy. Corey Connors, Spencer, out on Connors.
What do we think the ownership's going to be?
Yeah, exorbitant, and I think that's why Tommy's enticing. Those two Toms either side of Corey is delightful for the ownership because I think he's going to catch it all. And then Patrick Reed as well at $7,400. He's the poster child for don't forget that there's course history that can supersede any sort of current form when these guys that have played well at Augusta return. Like literally just remind yourself of last year where Phil, Patrick, Spieth, they were all guys that weren't necessarily playing the greatest, but showed up when it mattered at Augusta. So sprinkle them in how you see fit. I think, they obviously valid. I would probably go Reed over Connors. I'd probably go Fleetwood over Connors for sure.
I'd probably go Henley over all of them if we start throwing more names into the mix. But they're all very close one way or another. It's one of those situations where I think go with your gut in those spots. When we talk about any of these names, there's upside qualities, there's downside traits that are going to come into the mix. And I kind of talked a little bit about why I like Harris English this week. And I know that the course history that we've gotten at Augusta isn't necessarily pristine. It's a miscut, 2 finishes outside of the top 40, a 21st place finish in 2021. But this was a golfer up until last week that was trending with all the metrics pretty much exactly how you'd want. Performances were being put together. I thought at plus 345 for a top 20, there was a bunch of value to consider in that range for a name that, we'll see where the ownership lands, but I do think at 7,000, he is a step above any of the $6,000 golfers. And that's kind of why when we were having the Scheffler discussion at the beginning, I was trying to figure out what would happen if we went Scheffler in English and tried to make builds that way with it. And I just think that there's a quality about English this week that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Like I mentioned to you in our DMs earlier, he's a definite upside candidate, based off of his top 40, top 20 track record. Also, fun fact on Harris English, he's played here 4 times, made his debut in 2014. He's never played back-to-back. It's kind of a crazy situation. Very weird. So maybe he can kind of get a bit of momentum going finally. Cannot not speak about Phil Mickelson despite his age at this price tag. It's kind of crazy to think about, Spence. Who in the 6s? Give me 3 names that you will be targeting in the 6Ks for sure. Or if you only have 2, just give me 2. But we've mentioned Eckroat already. A lot of debutants here.
Yeah, I think Eckroat's worth consideration. My model had Adam Schenk in a very similar answer to Eckroat there. I don't know if I want to get caught in this Eric Cole game, but my upside numbers really liked Eric Cole this week. It liked the upside numbers on Nikolai Højgaard, then probably Kirk and Bradley. Like that's probably the names I'm mixing and matching for the most part.
I definitely think Kirk is a very underrated prospect in this range, Spence. What if I mentioned a guy by the name of Gary Woodland to you at $6,400? Incredible ball striking currently. And if you take a look at what he gets up to in majors, his short game deficiencies they don't go away, but they get much better. And I think that's his biggest weakness right now. And I feel like if we can just boom drives, like he can dismantle this golf course apart quite easily at this price tag.
I would rather play him if I'm like directly comparing to the Bubba Watsons, the Danny Willits, the Charles Schwartzels. More upside with Woodland there than any of those names. So I would agree with you on that.
Yeah. And one final name in this range that I'll be playing is Charles Schwartzel, just because of
the course stuff,
course history. It's weird. He's a $6,300 golfer. I'll have him in 10% on my lineups. It won't be crazy. He's one of my few options. Yeah.
It's funny, Byron. I don't have enough or any data on him at this point for obvious reasons, but there were years within the last 5 years of running that 7 Deadly Sins article where Charles Schwartzel was a staple of every single time that I would build it, that he was one of like the 8 to 12 names that would survive the cut every single time. And we haven't necessarily gotten that upside to win it, but there have been some relatively close calls, a 10th in 2022. And I want to say if I recall correctly, I think he was like near the top of that leaderboard
for a while. Yeah. I think he was like a first round leader. So another way to kind of go about betting these guys is there's like first round leader markets, first round top 20 markets out there. A lot of these course history guys that don't necessarily have the greatest form, potentially a first round leader. Like if you're looking to be completely degenerate again, like this is just completely got nothing substantiating this, but like a Freddie Couples, I will be betting him top 20 after first round. Like if there's a round he finishes inside the top 20, it's round 1 because every single round you stack, the variability kind of goes out the window. So we'll have to see in that department. But a few other names that I won't be minding in this range. Jake Knapp, I feel like is a great course fit here. We'll see. I know he's a debutant. We got to play a few of them. I don't mind Denny with some nice form entering the week. I don't know if he's going to blow up or not, but at $6,200, that's just too crazy of a price tag, especially having played nicely, I think, at Brookline a while ago. So those are some options I'll be looking at. Maybe a bit of Griot as well at $6,400 just to kind of spice things up. But
I'll throw one more name out there. This is not somebody specifically from me, but I got a text today from Nick Bratwish, my partner of Better Golf Pod, Sticks Picks over on Twitter. I know, and I don't know if he still does as of this moment, but as of, I don't know, 8 hours ago, he liked Adrian Morant quite a bit.
Ooh, your favorite guy who left your fantasy team because never played a shot for you, Spence.
No, him and Hatton just poof.
What a disaster. What a disaster. Does Tiger Woods make the cut or miss the cut, Spencer?
I'll say makes it. There are so many new. I don't know if he makes it and even finishes. It might be a repeat of last year, but it means a lot for him to make the weekend and say that he's done it. And there are so many nuances of this property that I'm never going to write him off. And I don't know where you have him in your model, but I got to be honest, like our model didn't hate him as much as I thought it was going to. It didn't like him. I don't want to say that, but like, where did you have him?
73rd, but where do you have him?
58th, 51st for safety. So it's kind of like some of that made cut equity. I understand it's top 50 in ties. We're kind of on the fringe, but I think Tiger and his experience and just like the understanding of the venue, I'll say he makes it.
Yeah, I'd say Jose Maria Olazabal's got better health than Tiger, which is the problem for me. You know, like when that guy will supersede you in that category, we got issues, which is unfortunate. But
yeah, I wouldn't feel the thing is like even with a Tiger Woods made cut bet, the problem that comes into play is at any moment he's liable to withdraw.
Yeah.
And I don't really want to lose wagers based off of a golfer that just the health goes south on him. But I don't know. I mean, force me to make a decision on that. I'll say he makes the cut.
Yeah, I would say too. You know, it's more likely that everyone makes the cut than doesn't, you know, in this field anyway. So I would lean that way too, Spence. Anything else you want to mention before we get out of here, buddy?
No, as Byron said at the beginning, use the code MASTERS to sign up for everything that we have going on at Rotoballer. Get Byron's model, get my model, get all the great work written by the two of us, Joe Nicely, Ian, Joe Idoni, Matt Miller. We really have a strong team that we've put together. We're very proud of what we're doing and jump in the Discord with us. We would love to have further conversations about this. Join the chat. We are building a true community over at Rotoballer, and we hope you consider becoming a part of it.
Absolutely. It's growing day by day, and the Masters Week is the best time to make friends. So we want you to do that, and we are giving you 30% off at rotoballer.com with code MASTERS. So really appreciate you guys for tuning in. Spencer, this is the longest Rotoballer PGA show of our career. That's totally fine. It's still short of 2 hours, but that's all good. It is the goddamn Masters after all, right? It's the Masters, man. We got everybody playing. I'm so excited for this week. Cannot wait. I'm going to be typing up an article until like 3 o'clock this morning. I can totally see it, but I'm going to love every second of it. So to all of you that tuned in, thank you so much. Hit the like button on the way out. Thanks, Millie Goats, for tuning in, buddy. We appreciate you. And we'll be back next week for the RBC Heritage, me, Spence, and having a good time over here. So enjoy the Masters, folks. Bet just a little bit more than you want and have a great week.